Thank you for coming to council tonight. Before I begin, I have a statement to read. Governor DeSantis Executive Orders number 20123, extended Executive Order number 20-69, which authorizes local government bodies to continue to conduct meetings without an in-person quorum at any specific location. And they can continue to hold the meetings using the Communications Media Technology, or CMT. On April 6, 2020, the City of Jacksonville Beach City Council further approved at their public meeting the use of CMT and alternative start times to conduct the council meetings and the briefings. Accordingly, this City Council meeting is being held in a modified manner using CMT, and the council, staff, and the public are not physically present in City Hall tonight. In a moment, the city attorney will explain the CMT procedures and adaptations for public attendance and public comment that have been put in place and being utilized. I've been avoiding it, but I'm going to put these on. Maybe I can read. So the city council members and city personnel are appearing through CMT, and the meeting will be opened with invocation by Phil. Are you doing it?
Yes, sir. I'll take care of it. Lord, please be with us tonight as we make decisions on behalf of the community. Please bless those serving our country, both here and abroad. And more importantly, be with our citizens that are out in public and our first responders that are out there with them, keeping us safe and keeping us order. Keep them all safe and bring them home to their families. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Phil. And if you would please rise and face the nearest flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This time, City Attorney, please state the CMT procedures and adaptations being utilized tonight.
Mayor, the city provided CMT options and instructions to in the notice to the public, and it was published online at the city's website. In order for the public to attend, participate, view, and listen to the city council meeting tonight, the city notified the public that they could view and listen to a live stream on the City of Jacksonville Beach YouTube channel utilizing Zoom technology, which is a free technology. Public may listen to the meeting via the phone, and we provided dial-in number and web ID number and instructions on how to do that. We provided information with respect to the hearing or speech impaired access and provided the phone numbers for that. The city notified the public that they may submit questions and comments concerning any scheduled agenda item, and also for the courtesy of the floor portion of the agenda. Citizens were allowed to submit written comments to the city clerk utilizing her email address, and that was provided in a notice and on the website. Also, the public could submit submissions via U.S. mail, which will be read into the record. And the public was also available, given the opportunity to provide comments via Dropbox at the main entrance of City Hall. We asked that the public provide their full name and address, and if they're a city business owner, list the business name and address as we normally would. We also provided for a public comment submission form on the City of Jacksonville Beach website, and those submissions will be provided to the council, and all submissions become public record. Written comments were to be received by the deadline, that are received by the deadline will be distributed to the city council members and to appropriate staff. And all written comments will be limited to 3 minutes of reading time, and the comments will be read into the record by the city clerk. Members of the public could also opt to comment via dialing in or utilizing Zoom technology, which we're utilizing tonight. And we requested that the members of the public register by noon on Monday today. And the speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. And we provided with instructions on how to utilize that Zoom technology. And the email address is an online comment form, will remain open during this meeting to accept comments from the public that will be read into the record up until 5 minutes before the particular agenda item is addressed by the mayor. And public comments for courtesy of the floor will be accepted until 5 minutes before the mayor opens that portion of the meeting. So Mayor, pursuant to the governor's order, we've provided ample opportunities for the public to attend, participate, and submit their comments utilizing CMT. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Okay, at this time, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Doherty,
Here.
Councilmember Dumont,
Here.
Councilmember Golding,
Here.
Councilmember Hoffman,
Here.
Councilmember Nichols,
Here.
Councilmember Vogelsang,
Here.
Mayor Latham.
Here. And looking for agenda item 113, please.
I move that we approve the minutes of the regular council meeting held on May 18th, 2020.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion from the council? If you would, remember to use your raise hand function on the Zoom if you need to get my attention or get on cue. Okay, seeing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? By your action, motion carries. Any announcements tonight? Ms. Golding?
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to let everyone know that Beaches Watch is going to have a meeting this Wednesday night. It is the 2020 legislative update that was supposed to have been held in April, but it got postponed because of COVID. It will be a virtual meeting, and Mayor Latham will be doing the legislative update, and then we'll also have Atlantic Beach Mayor Ellen Glasser and Neptune Beach Mayor Elaine Brown participating in the meeting as speakers as well, and they're going to provide COVID updates for their cities. So it should be a really good meeting. It'll be at 7 o'clock. It's going to be held via Zoom, and if anyone would like to join the meeting, you can go to beacheswatch.com, and there's an events section that has all the information about how you would join the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Golding. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next agenda item would be a courtesy of the floor. Madam Clerk, do we have any statements to read? Our city attorney, I think it is.
No, sir, I do not have any.
Okay.
Mayor Latham, we have one person registered to speak.
Okay, great.
So I'm allowing Ken Marsh, if you're there, you should be able to speak now.
All right, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, Ken. If you would, please start with your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes, sir.
All right, Ken Marsh, 2011 Gale Avenue. On May the 20th, the short-term rentals were approved to resume operations in Duval County under certain safety precautions. Our neighborhood recently learned firsthand that the rental season began because on Friday, May the 29th at 6:30 a.m., there was a verbal altercation happening in our streets which awoke the neighbors. Police were called and responded appropriately. In addition, the altercation also migrated toward the beach where another police was responded. My purpose tonight is to ask council to do a follow-up to the short-term rental ordinance 2019-8118 that was approved September 2019. As a reminder to council, contained within the whereas clauses is a stipulation that one of the purposes of the code was to, and I quote, protect the health, safety, and general welfare of permanent residents, property owners, and investors. Also, as a reminder, per the ordinance, unless there's an amendment, all STR apps should have been submitted by January 2020, and certificates subsequently issued by the end of April 2020. At the time of the ordinance discussion, it was relayed that the magnitude of the STR rentals within Jacks Beach was in the order of 400 to 800 units, some of which were part of community associations which were excluded from this ordinance. Recognizing that the STR certificate is a critical enforcement mechanism to ensure the success of the ordinance, I'd like to request 2 follow-ups from council. 1, after excluding community association rentals, what is the general estimate of the certificates that the city expected, and how many applications have been received? 2, in line with item 1, do we have any idea to the number of short-term rentals that should have made a submission and have not? In closing, according to the city web, residents have a 24/7 hotline that they can report nuisances related to short-term rental property. If this is the agreed upon process for handling the nuisances, then I strongly recommend that we communicate this throughout our community, because I can tell you factually that most of my neighbors are unaware of this process. If this is not how nuisances should be handled from the community, then we need to be told what the proper way is. Lastly, I want to thank and acknowledge the quick response from our police department. There are many folks that this week are especially quick to criticize the entire police community for the behavior of a few. Whether it is something as simple as answering a call for neighborhood nuisances or as dangerous as a shootout, I simply cannot fathom a community without our folks in blue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it. Was there anybody else, Jacob?
Nobody else.
Okay, thank you. We're moving on. Is the city prepared to discuss agenda item 2114?
Yes, we are, Mayor. This first item up for council consideration tonight is regarding the approval or disapproval of selecting Florida Natural Gas as our new natural gas supplier to Beaches Energy Services. Here to talk a little bit about the agreement and how we got to this point and what it means going forward is Beaches Energy Services Director Alan Putnam. Jacob, if you could please advance him to the panel.
Everybody hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yes, we can.
I'll make sure. So for the past 10 plus years, we've used TECO's People's Natural Gas. They've supplied our gas to us. This year, we saw an opportunity to review the 3 contracts that we currently have with TECO. We found out pretty quickly that we had outgrown our requirement for natural gas supply, where TECO was no longer the lowest cost provider for us. So we entered into a consulting agreement with TECO to bid out our natural gas supply. They came back at 7 suppliers responded to the RFP. We actually came back with savings of 17% or $146,000 on our natural gas supply. So it's big news for our customers. And so what this does, in essence, it replaces the natural gas supply contract with TECO. We currently have 3 contracts with TECO. Now that will be 2. One, TECO will continue to manage our system, do the day-to-day maintenance and compliance. And they'll also continue to provide supply from our gate station over on Beach Boulevard. And that's the end of my report, and the recommendation below.
Thank you, sir. And seeking a motion on 114, please.
I move that we approve an agreement with Florida Natural Gas to supply natural gas to Beaches Energy Services for a 1-year term beginning June 1st, 2020.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any debate by council? See, there we go. Mr. Doherty.
Well, yeah, Alan, do TECO provide any additional services? Or sorry, let me rephrase that. Will Florida Natural Gas do the same job regarding the infrastructure that TECO are doing, or is that a private contract between them and TECO?
So TECO will continue everything they're currently doing as far as maintaining our system from their gate station to every service on our island. All this does, it gives us an opportunity to buy natural gas supply in the interstate pipeline for much cheaper than what TECO was able to get for us.
So this is just the cost of like bulk gas then?
That's exactly what it does. It's buying natural gas on the market.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else have a question or comment? Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Doherty,
Yes.
Councilmember Demont,
Yes.
Councilmember Golding,
Yes.
Councilmember Hoffman,
Yes.
Councilmember Nichols,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogelsang,
Yes.
Mayor Latham.
Yes. And is the city prepared to address item 115?
Yes, we are, Mayor. This next item is for approval of the Rio Point final plat. This is a parcel of property that is located on 12th Avenue North on the north side of the road, west of Penman Road. It is a former child daycare facility and is being replatted into 10 single-family home lots. The zoning for the area is RS2, and all of the parcels, the new parcels of record, will meet minimum lot size requirements in accordance with our codes. Staff is recommending approval, and we have Senior Planner Heather Ireland on the line in the event you have any specific questions.
Thank you, sir. Any debate from the council? Mr. Doherty, your hand still up from last one, or you want to speak now?
Yeah, I had a question, Heather. If this is approved, can the developer then go in and change from single family to, let's say, townhouses? Can they, or do we hold them to what they're asking for now? Is Heather there?
Oops, sorry. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. No, it is zoned single family, so they would not be able to do townhouses there without rezoning the entire property. So they are limited to those 10 single family homes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments from the council?
Mayor Latham, point of order, I haven't made the motion yet.
Okay, thank you. Let's go ahead and get that done.
I move that we approve the attached final plat for the Rio Point subdivision, a replat of a part of the Castro E. Ferrer Grant, Section 38, Township 2, South, Range 2 East, 2115 12th Avenue North.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. And is there any other discussion? Ms. Hoffman?
I just wanted to point out, this is a minor typographical error, but important to the history of our community, that it's not Castro Y. Ferrer Grant, it's Castro E. Ferrer Grant, as in and in Spanish, so it should be a lowercase y. That's the name of the original Spanish land grant for that area. So if we can just update that for our records. And I will say that I think this project is a lot more in keeping with the area being a neighborhood. It was kind of strange to have a commercial business there with the traffic and things that come associated with a daycare.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Anyone else? And while we're removing or turning that capital Y into a small y, we lose the period too. Okay. Last call for inputs, questions. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Councilmember Demont,
Yes.
Councilmember Golding,
Yes.
Councilmember Hoffman,
Yes.
Councilmember Nichols,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogelsang,
Yes.
Councilmember Doherty,
Yes.
Mayor Latham.
Yes. And there's no voting on the next two items, but I'm going to ask Mr. Stefopoulos to take the lead on the discussion for agenda item 116, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, as the mayor indicated, this is not a voting item. This is an item that we're trying to develop a consensus on to see where each of the council members falls with regard to the two particular issues. Given that we're still under a declared state of emergency, we're trying to make the best informed decisions that we can. The question before us is whether or not to hold the 4th of July fireworks display. And you should all have a memo that came with the package, which talks about some of the issues at hand that we're considering at the administration level and with conjunction of the mayor. The first things that I'd like to point out is that the staff does have some concerns about going forward with the 4th of July display. The first is with regards to crowd size and police control. We'll talk about in just a minute the fact that there are many other organizations around us, communities, that are canceling their 4th of July fireworks displays. So obviously there is a concern from our police department as well as from administration that the number of people who may come to the beach specifically to watch fireworks would be higher than what we've seen in previous years, which would make both the control and the management of a crowd of that size a little bit more difficult to actually handle. The second is with regards to social distancing. As many of you are aware, there are still guidelines in place issued by the CDC as well as the governor with regards to crowd size and social distancing, the separation that you should try to maintain. Inviting tens of thousands of people into our downtown at night in the dark would create a virtual impossibility to manage any type of social distancing. As Chief Smith and I discussed several occasions leading up to this meeting, if the city were to proceed with a fireworks display, there legitimately can be no expectation of enforcing social distancing. He would need every resource in his disposal just to manage the crowd size alone, let alone trying to tell groups more than 10 to break apart. The third is with regards to what's actually going on around us, and I do have some updates for you. Within the memo, you see a list of communities in Central and Northeast Florida and where they stand with regards to 4th of July fireworks. Orlando has canceled and will be holding a virtual fireworks display. Flagler County, as well as the city of Flagler Beach, have both canceled. St. Augustine was waiting until today to make their decision at their council meeting. The city of Daytona Beach has canceled. Naval Station Mayport has canceled. City of Fernandina Beach will be having a fireworks display put on by a third-party nonprofit, but they will have no vendors at the event. Orange Park has postponed until Labor Day. Jacksonville is not making a decision until tomorrow. I think they're probably waiting to see what happens with us in St. Augustine because of that domino effect. If the two of us both cancel, then that means even a larger crowd may show up in downtown Jacksonville and make their control more difficult as well. St. Mary's has postponed theirs until the Shrimp Festival in October. Palatka, we have since learned, has postponed theirs as well. And we also found out that the city of Gainesville has also canceled their 4th of July fireworks events. Our recommendation from staff is that we not proceed with the event, but perhaps consider doing it at a later point in time in the year. Perhaps look at doing a Labor Day fireworks display. We did check with the pyrotechnic company, and there is no problem with scheduling them, or at least preliminarily scheduling them at this point in time for that weekend. The final check that we would need to make would be with the city of Jacksonville to make sure that the funding could still be used within this fiscal year just for a different date instead of 4th of July. Their offices had been closed up until today, so we'd not been able to get an answer with regards to the funding. And for those of you who may have heard, they actually postponed their non-essential workers returning to work today because of the protests that were occurring in downtown Jacksonville. So hopefully that's something within a 24 to 48 hour window we'd be able to get an answer on with regards to funding for Labor Day. With that, Mayor, and with your approval, the thought process here would be that each of the 7 council members would basically just take a minute or so to explain their position with regards to the fireworks. And then the mayor and I would effectively make a decision within the next 24 to 48 hours based on the feedback from council and any additional information we gather from the city of Jacksonville.
Sounds good. I'm just going to go down the list in front of me here for participants. And first on the queue would be Mr. Doherty.
Thank you, sir. I mean, there's several issues here. July 4th, I believe, is on a Saturday this year, and that will add to the crowds. If Jacksonville and St. Augustine cancel theirs and we go ahead with ours, I could see that being complete chaos. So I do think we should postpone, not cancel. I would like to throw in there maybe the thought of a New Year's Eve display as opposed to Labor Day. It'll be in the same calendar year. Concerning the funding, there's usually less people out here in the winter time than there are around Labor Day. Labor Day is another very busy day for the police. So we may be moving one problem to another problem there. But the main thing that I think we're all concerned with is the social distancing. And regardless if we have fireworks or not, Jack's Beach will be a zoo on that day. You know, I've worked every July 4th for the last 20 years, and I know that there are just thousands of people that come starting at 10 o'clock in the morning, and usually the fireworks are kind of like the last call, so to speak, for people to go home. So, you know, maybe if we could ask Chief of Police if we do have contingency plans for getting the crowd to, you know, disperse at a reasonable time, as opposed to pushing it to bar closing time, which is what I'm assuming will happen if we don't have the big display. But yeah, you're right. We cannot enforce social distancing. I've already seen that people are kind of over it already. I think in another month's time, there'll be less social distancing. And I do see the July 4th being a monster day for the beach and a very taxing and stressful day for the police force. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Hoffman?
I agree with Mr. Doherty's sentiments. Also, it's not mentioned in the memo, but on Saturday, July 4th, high tide is at 8:30 p.m. So making the opportunity for social distancing even lower. I just wanted to throw out there, I'm not advocating one way or the other for this, but I did listen in on a webinar this morning hosted by the Florida League of Cities. And one of the main topics was how cities are dealing with their fireworks displays, with the thought that it's nice to have a celebration during this hard time that we're going through, but how can cities safely do that? So there are some creative solutions that have been coming up besides just simply canceling. Postponing to another holiday is certainly one of them. I do like the idea of New Year's because we can do them earlier because it's darker earlier. So that would be definitely an idea I would support. But also the way that we're discussing it now assumes that the fireworks have to be on the beach over the ocean, which is certainly something that is unique about our fireworks and also is part of what draws the big crowds. But something that we could potentially consider for this year or even future years going forward when we do have a high tide situation is thinking differently about the location. And what I thought of based on the call this morning and some of the other ideas was our golf course. So having a fireworks display where the firecrackers are going off right over the golf course with limited access to that area. So you don't gather the crowds right there. It would be very visible to a lot of the community from their homes and versus attracting a large crowd to the area. So I just wanted to throw that out there as an idea, maybe not even for this year, but for future food for thought as a potential option for our fireworks display.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Nichols?
I guess I'll go next. I think we need to do absolutely everything we can to have these fireworks. I think the community really wants it. I think this whole time with COVID has really put us in a not a good situation with our community and the residents. And I think they need to get out and do something. I think, like Councilman Doherty said, there's already going to be a lot of people out here. Having the fireworks is not going to increase it. It's not going to double or triple it. I think that we need to have them, and especially if COJ has it. I think we leave it up to the city of Jacksonville. We have the ability to cancel at the very last minute. There's no reason for us to cancel now. The city of Jacksonville pays for the fireworks. The only thing that we have to pay for is the security and stuff, which is very easy to, a day or two beforehand say, hey, we're not having them. And then we're not out any money. City of Jacksonville, my understanding, has already agreed to pay the pyrotechnic company for the fireworks. They're already in. So those are paid for. If we end up delaying them a day or two beforehand, then then hey, so be it at that time. But I think our community, we need to do everything we can in order to have these for the community.
Okay, thank you, sir. Ms. Dumont?
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Ms. Hoffman and Mr. Doherty. I think delaying it is a good idea. There's just a lot of unrest right now nationwide. And in addition to COVID-19, I like the idea of moving it possibly to Labor Day or New Year's Eve. That said, New Year's Eve falls into a new fiscal year. It might be in the calendar year, but it's a new fiscal year. And then with Jacksonville, if they were to pay for 4th of July fireworks, we're going to ask them to pay for 2 4th of July fireworks, one being in July, one being on December 31st. So that's something that we'd need to think about to move it to the New Year's Eve. Now, that said, I think that's a nice idea as well, but that's something that we could think of down the road, making sure that Jacksonville's on board. But I think that delaying it momentarily, given just everything that's going on right now, would be the prudent thing for the city to do with the crowds that are going to come. I disagree with Mr. Nichols. I think that we will get more people if we have fireworks, especially with all the ones that have already canceled. And there are going to be a lot of people out here. There'll just be that many more people if there are fireworks. So that would be a concern. Definitely there'd be no social distancing. I'm going to assume, and the chief can comment on this, that while he noted that they would not be able to maintain social distancing if there is fireworks, they would be able to some extent if there were no fireworks and we still got, large crowds that day. But I'm not sure how that would work for the department. But like I agree with Ms. Hoffman and Mr. Doherty that I would postpone it, not necessarily cancel it, but postpone it to try and see if we can work it at another time.
Thank you. Ms. Golding?
Thank you, Mayor. I would echo what Ms. Dumont, Ms. Hoffman, and Mr. Doherty have said. I feel that it would be prudent to postpone the fireworks for now. As they've mentioned, I'd be fine with Labor Day or with New Year's Eve, either of those. My concern is with our police department and what they would have to deal with if we have the fireworks, and that's my biggest concern. I'm also concerned because if we have the fireworks, that's something that the city is sanctioning, and it's I'm just not comfortable with the city sanctioning something that's just encouraging a large number of people to come out to the beach and encouraging the problem with social distancing. So I would support postponing the fireworks.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Vogelsang?
I would agree with the majority of my colleagues in that I think postponing it is the best thing to do. I would be on board with New Year's Eve as the best option, even if it does put Jacksonville on the hook for potentially paying twice in the same fiscal year. We're not talking about a lot of money. I think that we can budget the $10,000 or $15,000 that the fireworks cost if we needed to. So that's not a real concern. I also want to have something that people look forward to. So if we do postpone it, we have a date in place. I would prefer the end of the year for New Year's over Labor Day, just because I don't know where we'll be Labor Day. I feel like in the December months and for New Year's, our town is a lot slower than it is normally. Even in September, I think we still have a lot of nice days, but just to help our local economy, to have a day where people come when we know we're slow, I think that would help. So I do support postponing it. I would pick New Year's as the date to have it, and then kind of craft that message to the public so we at least have something that our citizens and other residents can look forward to.
Okay, thank you, sir. The one thing to add to Mr. Stefopoulos' comments, I spoke with Hunter Conrad at St. Johns County today, and they're actually, the council is gathering on the 8th to vote, so we won't know until a week from today. I tend to agree with the majority, and my concern is not new to anything that you guys have said. You've covered most of it. The other thing that bothers me is the potential for, we're at a civil unrest period in our country's history. and creating additional crowds, in my opinion, is not what we want to be doing. Distancing is important, COVID's important, but the welfare and health and safety of our visitors during the event like that would also be important. So what I'm going to propose now is,
I'd like to say something else. I apologize. I still have my hand up before you. I just, Mr. Stapopoulos, I mean, is there any reason why we cannot wait on this decision until later in June? Is there a direct financial impact to us? I'd really like to hear what the city of Jacksonville makes, what their decision is beforehand, because if they have it and we cancel, we're going to be sending a lot of Jacksonville Beach residents to downtown Jacksonville during that time, because just like you were saying, the people from other communities are canceled, they're going to go somewhere else. We're going to send our people in our community somewhere else. And I think we need to coordinate with the city of Jacksonville and find out what they were doing before we make a decision. And they shouldn't be relying on us to make the decision for them.
Mr. Nichols, I've spoken with Mayor Curry as lately as yesterday, and he's still pondering the idea because of the issues that they're facing that we're not. But we are working very closely with Jacksonville and taking their inputs as we move forward.
And one of the things I'd like to say for the benefit of all the council, because this is a little something that was a head scratcher for me. You may have remembered that when I first brought this to council's attention a little over 3 weeks ago, the reason it was raised on my radar was because the agreement for the pyrotechnic company does not go to the city of Jacksonville. That agreement has been coming to the city of Jacksonville Beach for execution. So all of the fiscal requirements, even though the bill has ultimately been paid by the city of Jacksonville, the signatory on the agreement is with the city of Jacksonville Beach. And if we execute that agreement and then back out at a later point in time, we are on the hook financially for the deposit, which is half of the amount, somewhere around, I think, $11,000 or $12,000. We are trying to work with Jacksonville to change that proactively going forward. But right now, the agreement that pops up on my computer every several days is from the pyrotechnic company to me on their automated computer system, asking me to execute the document, which I have not done up to this point in time.
Do we have any financial exposure if we delay this until after the city of Jacksonville has made a decision?
Yes, the pyrotechnic company had told us that we had approximately a 30-day window within which we could not make a decision, so to speak. But once we got within that 30-day window, they would hold us to the terms of the agreement, which is one of the reasons that we waited until the 1st to see where we were with everything. Because once we get to June 4th, we are effectively within that 30-day window. And if we canceled after that point in time and had executed the agreement, we would be on the hook financially.
So as long as you delay executing the agreement with them, then we're not held to it until that time. I think the pyrotechnic company will understand the situation that's going on. They want to do that. They would like to do it, I'm sure, because they make money with these shows. And I don't think they'd have any problem waiting for the city of Jacksonville to make a decision, seeing that they are, it's all coordinated together. If we say no, city of Jacksonville is going to say no, and that's not what they want. That's not what the pyrotechnic company wants. I think we have leverage to where we can delay it.
Thank you, sir. And I owe you an apology. My participant list has been rotating and wouldn't fit in the entire screen, so I didn't see your hand, and I apologize. What I'd like to do at this point is, assuming that we move forward with postponing, we've got Labor Day and New Year's Eve as proposed alternatives. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if you want to go with New Year's Eve. On the computer, Sandy. Mr. Vogelsang, Ms. Dumont, Ms. Hoffman, Mr. Doherty, and Ms. Golding. Okay. That pretty much is all we need to know. City Manager, do you have anything else to address on this one?
Just keep in mind with New Year's Eve, we will have to make a request of the city of Jacksonville I think Councilor Dumont or Councilor Hoffman brought up the fact that it is a new fiscal year. Once we get past October 1, we would basically be asking them to roll over our 25,000 from this year into next year's budget to do 2 fireworks displays, December 31st and July 4th. We will try to have that conversation with Jacksonville as soon as possible, recognizing that they may delay the arrival of their non-essential personnel back to City Hall again for tomorrow. We're not sure yet.
Mr. Stavropoulos, can I get an answer to my question about, is there any more financial exposure to the city other than that deposit that we could potentially lose, even though the city of Jacksonville is already committed to the pyrotechnic company? Is there any other financial exposure that we could not change at, a week before 4th of July? And I'm not sure if that's a question for Jean Paul or for you, but my understanding is there's no other exposure. So I don't understand why we're making this decision at this time and we're not leaving up to the city of Jacksonville. Or we're not getting input, finding out what they want to do beforehand.
Chief Smith is probably still on the line and can talk to the issue of traffic control. I know that our Public Works Department usually goes ahead with additional traffic control and barricades. There might be a small dollar amount associated with rentals, but it's probably not a very large dollar value. If Chief Smith is on the line, Chief Smith, have you been able to receive any commitment yet from JSO that they would be able to provide support related to traffic as they have in previous years?
No, I have not. As y'all know, I have 70 people and everybody is working crowd control on the 4th. What Jacksonville has always done, the sheriff's office has supplied upwards of 70 to 80 people for traffic just for us. Understandably, I received some, we're not sure yet, last week. And then after this week, I have not heard back from the sheriff or the undersheriff on any commitments on traffic. Without that traffic control, there's no way we can do it unless you just want to let all the traffic go and let everybody fend for themselves, unless I get that commitment. And so to summarize, I have not received any commitment from the sheriff, and I cannot imagine with everything going on in the next week or two that he's going to have any idea whether he can commit 70 to 80 people to me for traffic.
So again, I guess my question is, why are we pressing this decision at this point in time? Why don't we wait a couple more weeks, see what happens, and let's do that. Also, I want to correct Councilmember Dumont said that I said that there wouldn't be any increased crowds. What I actually said is I don't believe the crowds would be doubled in size.
Who did you ask the question of, Mr. Nichols?
Mr. Stavropoulos, why is there any? Can you think of a reason that we should not delay this vote? I mean, delay giving a direction until this time. I mean, we're going to get a lot of backlash from the residents of Jacksonville Beach and the area if we make this decision for all of Duval County, because that's an accession. That's what we're actually doing, and we're going to get a heck of a lot of backlash from the whole community because of this decision if we make this right now. And I think we need to wait and see what the city of Jacksonville determines that they're going to do, and then we can make an educated decision based on having all the knowledge at hand.
Well, again, based on our conversations with the pyrotechnic company, their expectation is that we execute the agreement for them to move forward from a scheduling perspective. If we execute that agreement and we cancel at some point between now and July 4th, it's our name on the agreement. We would be on the hook for that deposit money, which is the 50% of the total charge.
11,000.
That's really the council's decision as to whether or not we want to.
90% of the Jacksonville Beach residents would be in favor of it. It's $11,000.
And
Mike, let's go ahead and bring this to a close. I mean, we've got a vote, and it's a pretty overwhelming vote, Mr. Nichols. So I'm going to go ahead and close this item on the agenda. We're going to move forward to the next item on the agenda, 117. And City Manager, again, this is yours to take a lead on.
Yeah, we've been operating in a modified format for the past couple of months now, both with council meetings and with council briefings. Our standard practice was to have the twice a month meeting dates with the briefings earlier in the day at 5:30 and the council meetings starting at 7 p.m. on the same day. Based on our use of the CMT to try and conduct business, and as you witnessed before this meeting, some of the IT challenges that we've run into, we've actually spread things out to where we're meeting 4 times a week. The question is, now that we're into phase 1, what should be the appropriate transition back to meeting in person, and when should that occur? The memo that you've received in front of you provides a recommendation, but again, that's subject to input from the council. The thought process would be that through the month of June, we would continue with spaced out meetings, having a meeting today, a council briefing next week on the 8th, a meeting on the 15th, a briefing on the 22nd, with at least 2 of those being virtual, and the possibility for an in-person hybrid meeting on the 15th, similar to what we did for our last in-person meeting. The saving grace is that the first meeting in July is something that we don't hold, and that gives us a break until all the way to July 20th, where the recommendation would be that we actually migrate back to our original schedules, which is a 5:30 p.m. council briefing, followed by a 7 o'clock council meeting. And again, that would be in person, potentially in a hybrid format with social distancing, yet open to the public. So this was just basically a stab at it now that we're into phase 1 of recovery. And I'm looking for input from the council as to what you think might be reasonable to start that movement back to some normalcy with regards to our meetings.
Okay, thank you, sir. And first on the queue is Mr. Vogelsang.
I had shared with Mr. Sofopoulos. Did you have a chance to send that out to my colleagues on what I shared via email? Or no?
I did not, but I knew we would bring it up tonight at the meeting. Councilmember Vogelsang came across some information. It's recommendations from the Reopening Florida Task Force, and their recommendations for the in-person public meetings is not to occur until phase 2, of which we are not currently in, nor do we have any indications as to when that would actually occur. With that, Phil, I'll give it back to you.
And to share that language with the council, let me bring it up here. It just says, phase 2 opening begins with a successful phase 1. This will occur when there is no evidence of a rebound or resurgence of COVID. So, I mean, I don't see why there's a state task force by the governor, why we would do something completely different. In reading that and going through the task force, they're obviously a team of experts. I don't feel like us lay people should make a determination as to when we should have in-person meetings again. I would rely on them. So my recommendation is that we stick with what the task force recommends. And once phase 2 begins, we then begin with in-person meetings again. But until then, follow the governor's lead.
Thank you, sir. I'm gonna, nobody objects, I'm gonna go right down the list like we did for the last item. Everybody have an opportunity to say their bit, because I'm sure everybody has an opinion. Next on the queue is Mr. Daugherty.
Thank you, sir. I think specifically because we just talked about canceling the fireworks, I think it would be a nice touch to have consistency in the way that we act also. So if we were to have live meetings before July 4th, it might, as Corey said, it might upset some of our residents. And Corey, I feel you. I mean, I know our residents are tired, they're fed up, and they want to get out. But at the same time, you know, regardless of what everybody feels about this virus, whether they feel it's a serious or not a serious thing, it's real. And I think as a city, we should lead by example. And, you know, while I love sitting in a room with you guys for a few hours every couple of weeks, you know, I think we should continue with this format until either phase 2 or July 20th. That's my thoughts on the matter. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Nichols?
Like Keith said, I think we're going to look pretty hypocritical if we don't, if we're having in-person meetings and we're not having a 4th of July fireworks celebration.
Okay, thank you, sir. Ms. Hoffman?
Mr. Staphopoulos, can you just talk about the amount of backlog of city business that's occurring right now because we're not having, for example, the Board of Adjustment and Planning Commission meetings in person?
There's a little bit of backlog on the planning side and also on the special magistrate side. Both of those boards are looking at going to meetings this month in order to start clearing out that backlog. But I recognize that there's a difference between a city council meeting and holding one of the other appointed board meetings. So those other appointed boards, I believe all of them are prepared to meet in person in order to conduct their business and start clearing backlog. But clearly the council meeting is a different animal. It covers anything and everything. So that backlog is hopefully going to be handled within the next 2 months. But planning, I believe planning commission, and I don't know if Ms. Ireland is still on the phone and could speak to that, but I believe she's got about a 60-day docket that needs to be cleared. But those are not items that would come in front of city council.
Okay. So you previously, when we discussed this, your position was kind of an all or nothing with regards to the meeting. So now you're okay with certain boards meeting in person, even if the council is not necessarily meeting in person?
Correct. We had some discussions about how we would handle that. The conversations we had at the staff level was if the boards did not want to meet in person, or some did and some didn't, that would create a conflict. How do you tell someone the special magistrate case can't go forward, but the planning commission can? All of the boards are willing to move forward at their discretion. So we are moving forward with all of those boards. But again, each of the functions that they handle is independent from council. So we're in good shape with doing that, I feel.
Okay. I mean, my position would be if we can start moving through that backlog with our different boards, that I would support waiting until phase 2 to get back to our full in-person council meetings. At this point, due to the variety of issues, the no knowledge or control of the crowd that might come with any given meeting, I think, and as well as for the optics, as mentioned before, that I would support maintaining our virtual meetings at this time.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Golden?
To follow up on what Ms. Hoffman said, I have been contacted by people who have items that they had submitted to the Board of Adjustment and had been held up for quite some time, and they are concerned about the backlog and how quickly that can be handled. But I'm glad to hear that the boards are interested in moving forward and addressing the backlog, because that is important to several people in our community. So, and like Ms. Hoffman said, I would support waiting till phase 2. I think that's a good point that Mr. Vogelsang has brought up, that we do need to consider following the lead of what this task force has recommended.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Dumont?
I agree with Chris.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Vogelsang, you've pretty much made your point clear, so.
Thank you, Don.
That leaves me, and I have to admit, I'm pretty compelled by what Mr. Vogelsang brought to the table tonight. I wasn't aware of that, and I agree that we need to stand in unity with the state and do the right things and the consistent things. So I'm also opposed to starting any new meetings, with the understanding that if the boards are willing to do this, I think that's imperative right now, because I'm sure, like the rest of you, I've received several calls about variances and people waiting to put in swimming pools and other things. So if we can find a way to make both work, that'd be great. Do you have anything else, Mr. Stefopoulos, on this?
No, just to summarize, the calendar of dates for the remainder of June will remain in effect as proposed, with the exception that the June 15th meeting will not be in person. We will do that one virtually as well. And hopefully somewhere between now and the middle of July, we'll hopefully find the state moving into phase 2. And we'll keep the door open for July 20th being our first in-person meeting. I'll knock on wood.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we're going to move on then to ordinances. And Madam Clerk, if you would please read ordinance number 2020-8142, second reading, public hearing by title only, please.
An ordinance of the City of Jacksonville Beach, Florida, amending Chapter 30, Article 3, Section 30-34A, additional homestead exemptions authorized of the City Code of Ordinances to increase the amount of additional homestead exemption for low-income persons aged 65 years and older from $25,000 to $50,000. Consistent with state law, directing the clerk to provide a copy of this ordinance upon City Council approval to the Duval. Provide a copy of this ordinance upon council approval to the Duval County Property Appraiser, providing for legislative findings, repeal of conflicts, severability, and an effective date.
Thank you, ma'am. This ordinance is before this council for a public hearing consideration on its second reading. Now open the public hearing on ordinance number 2020-8142. Madam Clerk, are there any public comments submitted from any parties?
No, sir, I have none.
Okay, thank you. And Communications Manager, are there any calls in queue?
There are none.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to close the public hearing and request a motion to adopt the ordinance as read by title.
I move that we adopt ordinance number 2020-8142 to amend City Code of Ordinances, Section 30-34A, to increase the low-income senior additional homestead exemption from $25,000 to $50,000.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Going to open the floor to council by discussion by the council. This is a second reading, and sorry, I'm going to get this shrunk down here. There we go. Is there anyone that would like to, from the council, that would like to debate on this issue, second reading? Don't see any hands going once, going twice. Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Golding,
Yes.
Councilmember Hoffman,
Yes.
Councilmember Nichols,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogelsang,
Yes.
Councilmember Doherty,
Yes.
Councilmember Demott,
Yes.
Mayor Latham.
Yes. Let's see. Our last item is going to be an ordinance that is not a public hearing, so we're going to have to regress to the old days. We've been doing so many for public hearing. Madam Clerk, if you would please read ordinance number 2020-8144, first reading by title only, please.
Okay. An ordinance of the City of Jacksonville Beach, Florida, adopting amendments to the Jacksonville Beach 2030 Comprehensive Plan, Coastal Management Element, to adopt new policies and objectives to meet the peril of flood requirements of section 163.3178 2F Florida statutes, providing directions to Planning and Development Department, establishing severability, and providing an effective date.
Go ahead and take a motion.
I move that we adopt ordinance number 2020-8144, adopting text amendments to the Jacksonville Beach 2030 Comprehensive Plan related to the peril of flood requirements of Florida statutes.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. And Mr. Stefopoulos, do you have a brief?
I do. Senior Planner Heather Ireland is currently on for this particular meeting. She's just going to do a quick overview of how we got to where we are today with the adoption of this particular ordinance, and just briefly touch on a couple of the highlights of what's contained within it. Jacob, if you could please pull Heather in.
Can everybody hear me?
Heather, here loud and clear.
I'm always hitting the wrong button. Okay, this is not new to you guys. We've been working on this since the fall of 2019, but I'll give you a quick refresher of how we got to these proposed comprehensive plan amendments. The city was awarded a grant back in September of 2019 through the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. And the purpose of that grant, again, was to analyze the city's vulnerability to sea level rise, more specifically how it also impacts our community with spring tides and storm surge on top of that potential sea level rise. We contracted with Stearns Weaver Miller to do all the heavy lifting for us, and they've done a fantastic job, collected all the data, did all the analysis, put together the phase 1 summary report, which you guys received last time when we took the resolution before you. And it gave us a bunch of beautiful maps. Again, just to reiterate, these proposed amendments are to meet what's called the peril of flood requirements of Florida statutes, which is required for coastal communities. Throughout the process, we had 2 public workshops. One was in December of 2019, and one was in February of 2020. This item went before the Planning Commission in March, and it was before you guys on April 6th, which I believe was our first hybrid meeting under Resolution 2057-2020. You guys voted to transmit these amendments to the state for their review. So we've done that. We sent that to all the reviewing agencies. We've received all their comments back. There were no objections by any of the state agencies to our proposed amendments, so we were happy with that. So again, our next step is to make these policies official and to adopt them into our comprehensive plan. And I'll just cover those real briefly. I know we've talked about these before, and then I'll answer any questions you might have. So what we're proposing is under an existing goal in our comprehensive plan in the coastal management element. It's goal CM3, which talks about minimizing the vulnerability to the community from coastal hazards. We're proposing a new objective under that goal to adopt and implement policies, regulatory strategies, and incentives to reduce our vulnerability to those events. Under that objective are 6 new policies, and I won't go in too much detail since I know you've seen these before, but just to summarize, the first one is that we want to look to consider in all of our decision-making processes what the impacts are going to be, and we want to try to reduce and mitigate the impacts of the sea level rise that we might see, high tide and storm surge events. So these things that we'd be looking at this would be, comprehensive plan amendments, land use decisions, subdivisions, our budgetary process, and then any infrastructure improvements that we'd be looking at. The next policy, 342, we do have one proposed change from what you saw before. It's not a content change. It really is just clarifying that the policy is specific. It's saying that we're going to implement redevelopment, development principles and strategies and engineering solutions to reduce, and this is where we just wanted to clarify, those flood risks that are identified in Objective 344, which is the sea level rise, the storm surge, and the spring tide. So under this policy, it talks about strategies such as land acquisition, other opportunities to reduce density and intensity in our flood zones. Number 3, we're proposing amending our floodplain regulations. It would increase our freeboard for new development in floodplains by 1/2 foot, limiting public expenditures in areas susceptible to flooding, ensuring that our drainage ditches and swales are maintained and things that we're currently doing now, and then coordinating with other government agencies to ensure that drainage improvements are done to mitigate any flood impacts. The next policy is in regards to site development techniques and best management practices that we would like to evaluate and adopt regulations related to those. So things like more stringent drainage level standards, reducing the extent of impervious surfaces, looking at shared access points and cross connections for development where it's feasible, reducing minimum pavement width for roadways, supporting regulatory and financial incentives for new development that would elevate the first floor on pilings to allow for parking underneath to get that first floor completely out of any flood zones. and providing public education on best practices. These last three policies are things that we're really already doing, and that's maintaining flood-resistant construction requirements that at least meet or are more stringent than the Florida Building Code. Making sure that construction activities seaward of the coastal construction control line are consistent with Florida statutes. And finally, that we'll continue to participate in the National Flood Insurance Community Rating System program and periodically evaluate our opportunity to increase our rating. And we did actually, as a side note, just finish that annual review process, and we are good to go for the next year. We're maintaining at a class 6 for our CRS program. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I know we have Ken Metcalf on as well, who's with Stearns Weaver Miller. If you have super technical questions that I probably can't answer, but he would be able to. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Heather. Very good report. A lot of work went into that, and we all appreciate it. Got one question for now from Ms. Hoffman.
One hand, multiple questions, but they're not super technical.
Okay.
I just wanted to know, so my questions are more in terms of practical application going forward. A few years ago, we had a resident in Lake Sanctuary come to us for help applying for a FEMA grant because her house had been flooded in both of the storms. With these policies in place, how would that have impacted, or would it have impacted our approach to helping her seek that grant funding?
I mean, I don't know that it would. Obviously, one of these policies is to encourage property acquisition where that's feasible and where, if there's finances available to do so. We always have at our discretion to help with those grant programs. There's several available through FEMA. I think this just kind of puts it in writing again, that would be an option available to us if somebody was interested in going after one of those grants for us to, or another agency or the federal government to purchase their property, basically removing it from the flood zone altogether.
And then the other question is in policy 343, it uses the word incentivize. And I was just curious what, for example, an incentive might look like, and how and where would that be codified? Or would it be up to, is it discretionary?
Which policy was that again? I apologize, I've lost my.
343, it says adopt regulations to require or incentivize the following site development techniques. I know I'm asking a hypothetical question. I'm just curious about what that might look like based on what other municipalities are doing, or what the idea was behind it.
Yeah, I actually would like to defer to Mr. Metcalf to answer that question if he's available and on and can speak to that in a little bit more detail.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. To answer your first question, the city would have discretion to determine the types of incentives that it would like to offer. Those incentives could be in the form of more flexible regulations, or the incentives could be tied to some type of a grant option if the city were to have any funding provided by the state or the federal agencies. The city may have some discretion in the way that the city might be able to allocate those grant dollars. So those would be a couple of examples.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions? A reminder, this is a first reading of a non-public hearing based ordinance. And Madam Clerk, if we could get the roll call, please.
Councilmember Hoffman,
Yes.
Councilmember Nichols,
Yep.
Councilmember Vogelsang,
Yes.
Councilmember Doherty,
Yes.
Councilmember Dumont,
Yes.
Councilmember Golding,
Yes.
Mayor Latham.
Yes. City Clerk, Attorney Chris, did you have anything you wanted to close with tonight?
No, sir, nothing tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. City Manager, Mr. Stavropoulos, do you have anything to close with tonight?
Nothing else. Thank you.
Then this meeting is adjourned. Thanks very much. Have a great night, everybody.